Iran thought it had the perfect strategy. Not a strategy built on military superiority, not a strategy built on naval dominance or air power or the kind of conventional force that matches American carrier strike groups in the Gulf. Iran's strategy was built on mathematics, cheap mathematics, the kind that does not require winning battles to win wars, send swarms of Shahed drones at American bases in Saudi Arabia. Each one costs $35,000 to build, some cost even less. The interceptor missiles the United States uses to shoot them down cost over $1 million each. Iran does not need to destroy anything important. It just needs to keep sending drones until Washington's defense budget bleeds out faster than its political will can sustain the operation. It was clever. It was working. The attacks on Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia had already damaged an E-3 Sentry AWACS aircraft, destroyed aerial refueling tankers worth tens of millions of dollars, injured American service members, and racked up $1.3 billion in material damage. The math was running in Tehran's favor. It ain't. And then the Pentagon did something that changed every calculation Iran had been making. It called Ukraine. And what Ukraine just installed at Prince Sultan Air Base is not a new missile system. It is not a new radar. It is something far more consequential than either of those things. It is a command and control platform so advanced, so precisely tailored to the exact threat Iran is deploying, that the strategy Tehran thought was bulletproof has just been turned against it. Iran's drones are now flying into a shield they cannot see, cannot jam, cannot overwhelm, and cannot defeat. And the country that built that shield learned how to build it by spending 4 years being attacked by the exact same weapons. Stay with me. Because what Ukraine just deployed in Saudi Arabia is not just a story about a single base being protected. It is a story about the future of warfare, the future of alliances, and the transformation of a nation that 4 years ago was begging for ammunition into the most valuable defense technology partner the United States has in this entire conflict. To understand why Skymap changes everything, you need to understand the specific problem it was built to solve and why no existing American system had solved it. Prince Sultan Air Base, located approximately 640 kilometers from the Iranian border in the Saudi Arabian interior, is not just another forward operating base. It is the central nervous system of American air operations across the entire Middle East theater. CENTCOM manages its regional air campaigns from here. E-3 Sentry AWACS aircraft, the airborne radar platforms that provide the battlefield awareness and coordination that every other aircraft in the theater depends on, operate from this base. Boeing KC-135, stratotanker aerial refueling aircraft that extend the range and endurance of fighter jets and bombers throughout the operational area, are stationed here. F-35 fighter jets are here. The logistical and command infrastructure that makes Operation Epic Fury function as a coherent military campaign rather than a collection of disconnected sorties is here. Iran understood this. That is why Prince Sultan became a priority target. The March 13th attack struck 5 U.S. Air Force refueling aircraft. Take out the tankers and the fighters, and bombers cannot maintain the operational tempo that a sustained campaign requires. The March 27th attack went further. Iranian missiles and drones damaged an E-3 Sentry AWACS airframe. 10 American service members were injured, 2 seriously. These were not random strikes at symbolic targets. They were precise attacks on the specific systems that make American air power in the region function. Remove the AWACS, and Washington loses the real-time aerial battlefield picture that coordinates strike packages. Remove the tankers, and the aircraft that depend on them are limited to shorter range sorties from closer bases. Iran was not trying to win a battle. It was trying to degrade the infrastructure of American air dominance one expensive platform at a time. The cost calculus made the strategy sustainable from Tehran's perspective. A Shahed drone costs $35,000. Some cost as little as $20,000. A single interceptor missile costs over $1 million. Iran sends 12 drones at a cost of $420,000. The United States shoots them down at a cost of $12 million. Even if every drone is intercepted and nothing gets through, Iran is extracting a 30-to-1 economic return on every attack. This is the math that Iran believed would eventually break American political will to sustain the operation, drain the precision interceptor inventory, force Congress to confront the cost-per-kill ratio, create political pressure to find an exit before the financial hemorrhage becomes unsustainable. The United States needed a different answer, not a better missile, a completely different approach to the problem itself. On April 22nd, Reuters broke the news that 5 separate unnamed sources close to the Pentagon had confirmed the deployment. The system is called Skymap. It is Ukrainian, and it has been secretly installed at Prince Sultan Air Base in the direct aftermath of the attacks that forced the Pentagon to acknowledge its existing defenses were not adequate for the specific threat Iran is deploying. Skymap is not a weapon. It is not a radar. It is not a drone or a missile or any of the physical systems that conventional thinking associates with air defense. Skymap is a command and control platform, a digital nervous system that integrates every sensor, every detection asset, every interceptor capability at a base into a single unified operational picture that allows commanders to see everything, identify everything, and respond to everything with a precision and speed that no previous system deployed at Prince Sultan could match. The company behind it, Sky Fortress, was founded in 2022 by Ukrainian engineers with direct links to Ukraine's military. They were not building a theoretical system to solve a theoretical problem. They were building a practical system to solve an immediate existential crisis. Russia was attacking Ukrainian cities and military installations with Shahed-type drones from day one of the full-scale invasion. The engineers building Skymap were doing so while the threat they were designing against was actively killing their fellow citizens. That origin matters. It is why Skymap works in ways that American systems developed in peacetime for different threat environments cannot fully replicate. What Skymap actually does, described in operational terms, is this. It pulls inputs from acoustic sensors, radars, and live video feeds from Ukraine's own surveillance drones into a single integrated digital interface that creates a real-time picture of the entire aerial battlefield. The acoustic sensors, a network that began with approximately 10,000 units deployed across Ukraine and has since expanded significantly, capture the specific engine noise signatures of incoming drones at distances and altitudes where radar coverage is incomplete or absent. The critical innovation isn't what happens after detection. Skymap does not simply alert operators that something is coming. It identifies what is coming. This distinction is the difference between the old mathematics and the new mathematics. Under the old system, an alarm triggers and the response is automatic. Interceptor fires. Expensive missile destroys cheap drone. The cost ratio runs in Iran's favor. Under Skymap, the identification happens first. Is this incoming threat a Shahed drone at $35,000? Or is it an Iranian ballistic missile at orders of magnitude higher cost? The answer to that question determines which response asset is appropriate. You do not waste $1 million interceptor missile on a $35,000 drone when a much cheaper counter-drone system can handle it. You do not send a cheap interceptor against an incoming ballistic missile that requires the full capability of a Patriot battery. Resource management at this level of precision is not possible without real-time identification. Skymap provides real-time identification, which means the United States can now apply the right response to the right threat at the right cost, rather than defaulting to expensive interceptors for every alarm regardless of what triggered it. The system that Prince Sultan had before Skymap's arrival was the Forward Area Air Defense Platform, known as FAAD, developed by Northrop Grumman in the 1990s. FAAD can detect incoming threats. It was designed in an era when the primary threats were mortars and rockets, not swarms of autonomous one-way attack drones operating at low altitude using flight profiles specifically designed to defeat radar detection. FAAD is not obsolete, but it was built for a different threat environment, and the threat environment at Prince Sultan in 2026 is precisely the one that Skymap was built to address. The Pentagon did not simply upgrade its air defense. It replaced the entire command and control architecture with one that was purpose-built for the exact threat it is facing, built by people who have been living inside that threat for 4 years. The math now runs the other way. Ukraine's battlefield experience with Shahed-type drones produced something beyond Skymap. It produced a family of interceptor drones costing as little as $1,000 per unit. $1,000. Against a Shahed that cost $35,000, against the interceptor missiles that previously cost over $1 million each. The cost ratio that Iran built its strategy around has been inverted completely. Iran sends 12 drones at a cost of $420,000. Under the old system, the United States spends $12 million shooting them down. Under the new system, guided by Skymap's real-time identification and queuing, cheap interceptor drones handle the Shahed threat at a fraction of the previous cost, while expensive interceptor missiles are preserved for the threats that actually require them. The Department of Defense announced on April 6th that Joint Interagency Task Force 401 had committed more than $600 million to counter drone programs. $350 million of that was already committed during the first month of Operation Epic Fury, precisely the period when Iran's attacks on Prince Sultan were demonstrating the inadequacy of existing defenses. The investment is going toward exactly the capability shift that Skymap enables. Additionally, the United States invested over $5 billion in September 2025 in a contract with Raytheon for Coyote interceptor drones, running through 2033. A single Coyote costs approximately $125,000. Not as cheap as Ukraine's $1,000 interceptors, but capable of handling both aerial and marine drone threats, and dramatically cheaper than the $1 million missiles that were previously the primary response tool. Current production runs at about 100 Coyote drones per month, with capacity expansion planned to reach 40,000 units over the contract period. Skymap integrates with the Coyotes. It integrates with acoustic sensors. It integrates with radar coverage. It integrates with live surveillance feeds. Everything feeds into a single operational picture that allows the right response to be deployed at the right moment against the right threat. Iran's mathematical strategy has been answered with better mathematics. And the answer came from the country that Ukraine built while being attacked by the same weapons Iran is now deploying against American bases. Now look at what Skymap's deployment at Prince Sultan means beyond the immediate tactical picture. Because there are strategic dimensions to this that reshape relationships across multiple theaters simultaneously. First, the relationship between Ukraine and the United States. The past year has seen that relationship tested in ways that created genuine uncertainty in Kiev about how much Washington could be counted on. Clashes with the Trump administration over negotiating positions, over the pace of weapons transfers, over the conditions attached to various forms of support, left Ukraine repeatedly needing to demonstrate its value to an American administration that frames relationships in transactional terms. Ukraine's response to that transactional framework was not resentment. It was strategy. When Operation Epic Fury began, Ukraine was among the very first nations to step up and offer practical assistance. Interceptor drones, drone warfare experts deployed to the Gulf, and now Skymap, installed secretly at the most important American airbase in the Middle East, run by Ukrainian technicians who are training American personnel on its operation, while simultaneously drawing on 4 years of combat experience with the specific threat those American personnel are facing. FDD action made the point explicitly. Ukraine is offering this level of support even though it has been drained by over 4 years of war with Russia. It is doing so deliberately. It is doing so strategically. But doing so deliberately and strategically does not make it any less real or any less valuable. Ukraine is proving, in the most concrete operational terms available, that it is the kind of ally that shows up when things get difficult. Congress should take note, FDD action argues. Ukraine is not just a recipient of American security support. It is a provider of capabilities that the United States needs and does not have. The relationship is becoming genuinely reciprocal. And reciprocal relationships between democracies under existential pressure are more durable and more strategically valuable than patron-client arrangements where one side only gives and the other only receives. The back-scratching dynamic is becoming explicit and acknowledged. Ukraine helps the United States defend its base against Iranian drones. The United States maintains its support for Ukraine's defense against Russian aggression. Both sides get something they need that the other party is uniquely positioned to provide. The relationship strengthens precisely because it has become mutual rather than one-directional. Behind the scenes of this developing partnership, something is happening that illuminates how these relationships actually get built and sustained over time. On March 31st, Defense One reported that retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg had joined the board of a company called Power US. Kellogg had been Trump's special envoy to Russia and Ukraine beginning in November 2024. Power US is a Florida-based company created specifically to acquire technology from and build relationships with Ukrainian drone manufacturers. This is not a coincidence. It is a signal about how the network of US-Ukraine defense cooperation is being institutionalized beneath the level of formal governmental agreements. An advisor with direct White House access joining the board of a company specifically designed to connect American defense procurement to Ukrainian drone technology is how relationships that begin as emergency cooperation become permanent structural partnerships. The money the Department of Defense is investing in counter-drone programs represents a market opportunity that Ukrainian drone manufacturers are uniquely positioned to compete for. They have the products, they have the combat-tested performance record, they have the operational data from 4 years of fighting the exact threat environment that the DoD is trying to address. And now, through the network being built by figures like Kellogg, they have the institutional connections to translate that competitive advantage into commercial relationships that sustain Ukrainian defense industry through and beyond the war. Ukraine is not simply deploying Skymap at Prince Sultan as a one-time favor. It is establishing itself as the indispensable counter-drone technology partner for American operations in the most active military theater on Earth. The $600 million DoD counter-drone investment is the market. Ukraine's technology and combat experience are the competitive advantage. The relationships being built through channels like Power US are the commercial infrastructure that converts the advantage into sustained revenue. The deployment extends beyond Prince Sultan in ways that multiply its strategic significance. Over 200 Ukrainian drone operators and military experts are already active across Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, and Kuwait. They are training local forces, they are deploying interceptor systems, they are building the institutional knowledge base that allows Gulf militaries to operate these capabilities independently rather than being permanently dependent on Ukrainian expertise for every operation. The 10-year defense agreements Ukraine signed with Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE create the framework within which this knowledge transfer is formalized and sustained. Joint production facilities, electronic warfare software integration, AI-supported air defense architecture, each element building on the foundation that Skymap establishes at Prince Sultan. Ukraine is also running parallel drone diplomacy across Europe. Experts deployed to European nations whose defense establishments are actively working to reduce dependence on American military guarantees, while the Trump administration's commitment to NATO's Article 5 framework remains uncertain. Ukraine's combat experience is as valuable in that context as it is in the Gulf, because the threats European militaries need to prepare for include the same Russian drone and missile systems that Ukraine has been developing countermeasures against for 4 years. The pattern that emerges across all of these relationships is the same. Ukraine arrives with combat-proven technology. It trains local personnel, it builds institutional relationships, it creates dependency that is not exploitative but genuinely mutual, because the capabilities Ukraine offers are ones that the recipients cannot easily acquire elsewhere. And through each of these relationships, Ukraine strengthens its position with the United States by demonstrating that its investments in allied capability produce strategic returns that benefit American interests directly. Zelensky's pursuit of multi-year drone deals with the United States is not a separate track from Skymap's deployment at Prince Sultan. It is the logical extension of the same strategy. Prove the technology works. Demonstrate the value of the partnership. Build the commercial and institutional infrastructure that converts demonstrated value into durable contractual relationships. Then expand. For Iran, the implications of Skymap's deployment at Prince Sultan deserve precise articulation. The strategy that Iran believed was mathematically sound has been structurally defeated. Not by a better missile, by better intelligence about what each incoming threat actually is, which allows the appropriate and cost-effective response to be selected rather than defaulting to expensive interceptors for every alarm. The cost asymmetry that made the drone swarm strategy viable against American defenses has been eliminated. The specific damage that Iran achieved in March, the AWACS aircraft, the tankers, the injured service members, the billion-dollar material losses, was achievable because Prince Sultan's existing command and control system was not optimized for the specific threat Iran was deploying. FAAD, designed in the 1990s for mortars and rockets, was operating in a threat environment for which it was not built. Skymap was built for exactly this environment, by people who have been inside this environment continuously for 4 years, against the same drones, in similar operational conditions, with the same electromagnetic and geographic constraints that make low-altitude, slow-flying autonomous drones so difficult to defeat, with systems designed for different threat profiles. The March attacks on Prince Sultan cannot be repeated with the same effectiveness now. The AWACS aircraft that was damaged will not be as vulnerable to the next swarm that approaches. The tankers that were struck have a different defensive architecture around them. The base that Iran thought had exploitable gaps now has a system designed by people whose entire operational mission since 2022 has been finding and closing exactly those gaps. But the strategic damage extends beyond the defensive improvement at a single base. Every Iranian strike planner who was building operation sequences around the assumption that swarm saturation could reliably penetrate Prince Sultan's defenses now has to rebuild those assumptions from scratch. They do not know precisely how Skymap works. They do not know the exact detection thresholds. They do not know the identification algorithms. They do not know the response sequencing. They are planning against an unknown system developed by the country whose 4 years of defending against their own weapons has made that country the world's leading authority on defeating exactly what Iran is trying to deploy. Iran cannot buy the countermeasure expertise it needs. Russia, which supplied the original Shahed design that Iran copied, is itself being destroyed by Ukrainian counter-drone systems. There is no available source of expertise in defeating Skymap because no one has ever faced it in combat conditions. Iran is now trying to plan operations against a system whose developers' entire institutional knowledge base was built by fighting the threat Iran is currently posing. The broader message that Skymap's deployment sends to every actor watching the conflict extends well beyond the immediate tactical situation in Saudi Arabia. Ukraine, the country that the world watched being attacked and needed to be saved, is now saving others. The country that spent 4 years developing technologies under fire because it had no other option is now exporting the results of that forced innovation to the most powerful military alliance in history because those results are better than anything peacetime research and development produced. This is not a story about Ukraine's resilience, though that is part of it. It is a story about what sustained investment in solving real problems under real conditions produces, compared to what academic research and controlled testing produces. Ukraine's acoustic sensor network started as adapted cell phone microphones because that was what was available and what needed to work. The result of iterating that starting point under fire for 4 years. testing against real drones in real conditions with real consequences for failure, is Skymap. No American defense contractor, however well-funded, however technically sophisticated, could have produced Skymap in the same form. Because producing Skymap in that form required being attacked by the thing it defends against for 4 years straight, required iterating the design based on what actually got through, required optimizing the algorithms based on what the acoustic signatures actually sound like in real desert environments, not simulated ones, required building the human expertise base that now sits at Prince Sultan training American personnel. That expertise cannot be purchased. It can only be earned. And Ukraine earned it the hardest way possible. What the Pentagon recognized when it made the call to Ukraine is not simply that Skymap is a good system, it is that Skymap is the right system for this moment, in this theater, against this threat. And the reason it is the right system is the same reason it could only have come from Ukraine. The impenetrable shield is up at Prince Sultan Air Base. The acoustic sensors are listening in patterns that Iran's strike planners do not know. The identification algorithms are running in real time against every incoming signature. The integrated picture is flowing to operators who have been trained by people who built their expertise, surviving 4 years of exactly what Iran is now sending. The drones that Iran sends are still arriving. But they are arriving into a system that sees them earlier, identifies them more precisely, and responds to them more cost-effectively than anything Prince Sultan had before April 22nd. The math that made Iran's swarm strategy viable has been replaced with different math. Math that Ukraine wrote in the fires of its own war and that the United States is now deploying in its... Iran has no answer for Skymap. Not because the system is invincible in any absolute sense, but because building an answer requires the kind of operational experience with the system's specific capabilities that can only be gained by operating against it. And the only way to operate against Skymap is to send more drones into the base it is defending. Every drone Iran sends now generates data that makes Skymap better. Every attack teaches the system something new. Every swarm that is successfully identified and defeated refines the algorithms, validates the acoustic signatures, and improves the response sequences. Iran is not just failing to defeat the shield. Every attempt to defeat it is making the shield stronger. Ukraine spent 4 years in that exact position against Russia. It knows precisely what it feels like to be the side improving the system under fire. It also knows exactly what it produced. And what it produced is now defending the most important American base in the Middle East from the country whose weapons taught Ukraine how to build it. That is the full picture. Iran thought it had the math figured out. Ukraine just changed the math completely. And the shield that went up at Prince Sultan Air Base has no answer waiting for it in Tehran. None.